Shalom, brethren in Yeshua Messiah. I am Kirui Andrew from Kenya, East Africa. Allow me to comment on Professor R.L. Solberg, one of the best professors I have ever encountered here in YouTube. I like the way Professor is challenging what he believes are false teaching. I want to congratulate him for that. In one rebuttals, as he refers to it, on one Alexander Enoch, where Alexander is teaching that real Christians don't eat pork.
Real Christians do not eat pork. Yes, that's right. I said it. Real Christians do not eat pork.
Let's check.
You will bear with me. English is not my first language, therefore my pronunciation not be what you are used to. So in this rebuttal, Professor had to say this.
Consider this passage, and by these, referring to all the animals that were just listed, you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening, and whoever carries any part of the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Now, we can all agree that dead flesh is unhealthy to handle, right? But is it only unhealthy until the evening? Is that how bacteria works? Of course not. Or consider women in childbirth. When a woman becomes pregnant and gives birth to a male child, she will be unclean. This is the same Hebrew root word here, tameh, 7 days. She must not touch any holy thing or go into the sanctuary until completing her days of purification. So clearly, the Torah's concept of unclean isn't a matter of health, but of ritual purity. So if it wasn't for health reasons, why did God give Israel these dietary restrictions? Well, it was for the same reason that he gave them the laws about circumcision and the Sabbath and so on. God wanted to set Israel apart as a holy nation. In Exodus 19, God says to Israel, "Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant," which they would do by obeying the laws that God gave them, "you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." So God was saying, I am the Lord, and the whole earth is mine to choose from. I could have selected any nation or any people, but I chose you, Israel. I chose you, descendants of Abraham. You are special to me. If you obey my laws, I will make you a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now, the word holy, which in Hebrew is kadosh, means set apart or sacred or different. So Israel was to obey these food laws and many of the other laws given through Moses to show that they were set apart from all the other nations who weren't given food restrictions. It was God's way of showing to the world, these are my people. And Israel's obedience to these laws was their way of saying, we belong to Yahweh, the one true God. This was the Sinai covenant.
On the issue of clean and unclean food, he's saying, so clearly the Torah's concept of unclean is not a matter of health, but for ritual purity. Now, I would like to request him maybe to make a lesson on the same ritual purity. What does it mean in detail? Because the word ritual, is it that he's saying this animal will not be used for cleansing people? But then what was the reason for that? In Genesis chapter 9, verse 4, I think, we are told blood is also not part of the food which Israel was to eat. And the same is repeated to the Israelites in Leviticus 17, verse 12. Yet we know blood was used in cleansing Israel by the priest, and even the blood of Yahshua is what cleansed us. So I am not understood properly on the issue of ritual purity in relation to these unclean animals. Now then Professor continues to say, so if it wasn't for health reasons, why did God give Israel this dietary restriction? Then he goes ahead to answer saying, well, it was for the same reason that he gave them the laws about circumcision and the Sabbaths. Now, so up to there, it's like there were some 3 sets of laws given to Israel, dietary laws, circumcision, and the Sabbaths. And then he goes ahead to say, and so on. Now, why don't Professor here say it is what is the reason why Israel was given the entire Sinai covenant? Why does he isolate 3 categories of laws, then come back and then so on and so on? Then he goes to say the reason why Israel was given these 3 sets of laws and so on, because God wanted to set Israel apart as a holy nation. And then Professor reads Exodus chapter 9, which is actually verse 5 to 6. And then this verse is, in context, it is talking about the entire Sinai covenant, which Yahweh gave Israelites, and then so that if they will obey this law, they will be his people. Because it is saying here, but I choose you, Israel. That is from many other nations. The descendant of Abraham, and then he says, if you obey my laws, Yahweh will make them a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And then, so Professor here says, so Israel was to obey these food laws. Now, but this verse is actually talking about the entire Sinai covenant, but Professor is chipping in on the issue of food laws, and then he comes in many of the other laws. So it's like Professor is starting from food laws, then many of the other laws. But suppose it was many of the other laws, then the food laws. Now he had brought about the circumcision issue and the Sabbaths, so as to set Israel apart from the other nations. And then he says, from all other nations who were not given food restrictions. Now, Israel was not given. What about these other laws? The Gentiles were also not given. Now, so then Professor in this short clip is summarized by saying it was God's way of showing to the world that these people, that these are my people, and Israel's obedience to these laws was their way of saying we belong to Yahweh, the one true God, and then this was the Sinai covenant. So I would like to request Professor if he will get time to clarify this. How this unclean meat, how they affect people's Israelites' ritual purity. Then number 2, which laws were given to Israel to set them apart from the other nation? Is it the entire Sinai covenant, which at some points is like he agrees, or is there specifically the 3 set of laws, dietary restrictions, circumcision, and the Sabbaths? Then number 2, which laws changed, as he normally used the term changed, or got fulfilled as I use it, when Yahshua was impaled? Is it the entire Sinai covenant which changed, or simply the dietary restrictions, circumcision, and the Sabbaths? I would also like to request Professor to comment on Genesis chapter 1 verse 29 and Genesis chapter 7, because these verses shows that the food laws were in existence long before Abraham, long before Moses. The issue of food, the foundation is the origin is it was long before the Sinai covenant. English is not my first language. It's actually the third language. That's why my way of pronunciation may not be what you are used to. Thank you so much.